Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Pulse, also known as Kairo, a Japanese horror movie from 2001 that was directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. After one of their friends commits suicide, strange things begin happening to a group of young Tokyo residents. One of them sees visions of his dead friend in the shadows on the wall, while another's computer keeps showing strange, ghostly images. Is their friend trying to contact them from beyond the grave, or is there something much more sinister going on? Now, I've already reviewed Pulse in my Asian horror playlist, but it definitely deserves its own standalone video. Now, this is almost certainly in my top 5 Japanese movies, like my favorites, from any genre. So I'm a big fan of this one. And one of the reasons for that is that you just don't see many movies quite like this. You know, it's kind of unique. Technically a mainstream horror movie when you look at the studios that were behind it, but it does have a very distinctive art house vibe to it as well. It is glacially paced, and the themes primarily revolve around philosophy and psychology, really. Now, the premise is basically nihilism, really, that's expressed through loneliness. And the superficial connections that one sustains with other people are conveyed as very, brittle and meaningless. And that kind of shatters when you're confronted with the relentless isolation that exists on a much deeper level within each person. And I don't think any character in this film is actually murdered. And this is a 2-hour movie. I don't think anyone is actually murdered in this, despite the fact that many people do die. So the victims are basically consumed with this sense of eternal loneliness, many times caused by simply interacting or seeing spirits. And things happen after that, let's just say. And it's pretty interesting. Certainly one of the most unique and fascinating ideas for a horror film that I've seen. Tons of visual and conversational references to all of its primary themes, some of which you may not even notice the first time you watch it. So that whole structure is one of the things that makes this director really unique and interesting to me. You know, and you see the same thing in films like Charisma, Cure, or even Retribution. Another thing that's possibly even more impressive related to this film specifically is the direct link that it makes between people connecting via the internet and loneliness. And when I first saw Pulse back in the day, I thought it was an interesting concept, but ultimately did not make much sense, because how does connecting with more people through the internet result in more loneliness on an individual basis? It seems counterintuitive, right? So we fast forward 20 plus years to today, and we're seeing this exact thing in real life. You know what I mean? And there are plenty of examples. If you look at any number of studies that are done on the effects of social media on relationships, to the constant distractions of cell phones, that prevents people from interacting with each other in public places. And, all these problems were manifesting years before the recent worldwide event that occurred, right? Although that event that occurred in recent years definitely accelerated these things a little bit more, but these things were happening regardless before then. In any case, Pulse turned out to be an unbelievably prophetic film. Now, the horror elements in this are exactly what I like to see. Practically no cheap jump scares at all. Relies on creepy, long-sustained images and sequences that are highlighted by, really gloomy imagery and awkward ghost movements. There are some very memorable scenes in this. A few of my personal favorites are the walking woman early on, the tower fall, which I still don't know how the heck they shot that scene. That's a phenomenal shot. The ghost kiss scene near the end, and the desolate drive through the city, near the finale. It definitely delivers on the horror front, but this movie, has more of a depressing impact to it instead of a viscerally disturbing impact. It's more sad and depressing than it is scary per se. It hits a little differently from your typical horror movie, but that's kind of what makes it special. One of the things. I love the imagery overall in this, though. That includes the location shots, some of the decrepit buildings that they found to film in, and there's a lot of gloomy atmosphere. And on subsequent viewings, I noticed that there's like a yellowish hue or yellowish lighting at times that gives it kind of a macabre beauty, you know. Music is great, too. I actually have the score on CD, and I listen to it around Halloween time. There are a few big-name actors in this, one of which may surprise you near the end if you haven't, seen this film yet. So look out for that. And Kiyoshi Kurosawa, most well-known internationally for his horror flicks, even though he made other stuff throughout his career. Some films I've covered on this channel. He did make an obvious decision to kind of move away from the horror genre during the late 2000s. But I was annoyed when he did that because his films are like so unique. I like having horror films they have this like really unique vibe to them, and he was giving us that. But he's made some very impressive stuff in other genres afterwards, so it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, I highly recommend Pulse. It's a newer classic and a must-watch if you're even remotely interested in Japanese horror. The main warning I would give, it's very slow-paced, and I think that's, people who don't like it, that's their main problem with this, I think. But it's so intoxicating in its presentation, and the atmosphere is so impactful that I actually think this is a lot of fun to watch, which is not really the, probably the response or that someone would have while watching this, the typical person. But I watch this movie quite a bit and rewatch it, and I just I find it to be a fun viewing experience, unbelievably. But it's currently available streaming on various sites, and it's also on physical media. Arrow Video released a very good Blu-ray just a few years ago. So, yeah, check this one out if you haven't already. And as always, I'll see you next time.